Welcome everyone to the DAZN Soccer Show. Myself, Adil Odipo. Some big games in the Premier League this weekend, and to discuss them, former Man City and QPR defender Nadim Anua. Nadim, let's start with the biggest of the big games, right? These are the two teams that have been battling for the Premier League for the last 5 or 6 seasons, and that's Liverpool versus Man City at Anfield. No one would have predicted this is second versus 10th. This normally is first versus second, first versus third. What do you make of this game? Liverpool going into this game off the back of the really good win up at Ibrox, but Man City are Man City, aren't they? Man City, for the first time, will be going to Anfield in a long time anyway, as favourites, weren't they?
Yeah, it definitely feels that way, but those odds have probably shortened a little bit just because of how well Liverpool played midweek. I think to be scoring 7 goals in a Champions League game is very significant. It doesn't matter who you're playing against, because the side
Yeah.
that made it there, they've qualified by right. So then that's such a big confidence boost, especially given the sort of air of negativity that existed because maybe Alexander Arnold's injured, Luis Diaz is injured, they're not in the best of form. But it does change things just that little bit. And yes, City might be arriving as favourites, but now Liverpool fans have got something to be excited about. The game itself would have been a good one, but off the back of such a positive result, there's a greater positive feeling. And even for the City perspective, they would have been taking them seriously anyway. But now you're seeing the attacking prowess. You're wondering how they did it. Because, say, City would have loved to have scored at least one goal in midweek in Copenhagen. Obviously, the red card sort of changed that a little bit. But it's an exciting time. And second versus 10th, as you mentioned, it does seem strange. And in some ways, you'd think it has the air of being a must-win game for Liverpool. But then in the grand scheme of things, you can then be sensible and say, well, you've still got another 30-something games. But to try and catch up the amount of points to possibly be behind City would be a long shot. But I think it makes for a very, very good game. I'm expecting to see lots of attacking football. Defenses aren't necessarily in a position whereby they're going to be praised, I imagine. So, going to be high scoring, I believe. And I'm not going to say which side I support, but yeah, I'm just hoping that they get one more goal than the others. Yeah.
Oh, don't worry, I've got my Liverpool hat on. You can keep your Man City hat on. In terms of the selection dilemma for Jurgen Klopp, obviously, look, he's played a 4 up front recently. He's gone back to a 3 against Rangers midweek. What do you think he does, especially with Diaz out injured now? Do you think he sticks with the 3, or do you think he maybe tries to sort of experiment with a 4 and 2 in the midfield? What do you think he does?
I think for me personally, I think there's a difference between playing Jota up there and playing Firmino. I think if you play Firmino up there, I think he's sort of better at linking the midfield just that little bit.
Yeah.
So you could go, depends on whoever they want to play out wide, but I think you do have the sort of flexibility within that. I think if you are to be beating City, you need to be very competitive in the midfield. So I think you'd probably lean towards having somebody who can be in and around those sorts of positions. So I think they'll go that way, but I could be wrong because at the end of the day, Klopp knows his team better than, say, any of us even looking at it once a week on a Saturday. So it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a very interesting tactical battle. But the best thing about it is, because it's at Anfield, because Liverpool sort of enter the game as slight underdogs at home, maybe, it's going to be more than just about the tactical battles. There's going to be a physical element to it. It's going to be a bit about duels. It's going to be a case of reaction based on, say, the fact they lost away at Arsenal. They need to try and lay a marker down. And for all we know, if they win against City, that could be their sort of kickstarter to their whole season. And yeah, it makes for such a great time. It's going to be a tough game for City. I think if they come away with a win from there, then they would have put in an exceptional performance, because the way that I see it, Liverpool have got every bit of encouragement to go and try and lay a marker down and just get people back into believing them again.
Key battles everywhere, right? Normally with Liverpool and City, the battles in that midfield area, the engine room of Liverpool versus almost the more cultured and skill-based midfield of Man City. But this battle between Haaland and Van Dijk is the one I think everyone's waiting to see, right? Haaland's been able just to bulldoze defenders. And although Van Dijk maybe isn't, the Van Dijk of a couple of years ago, still one of the best defenders in the world, that's the key battle there, isn't it? Haaland versus Van Dijk.
Yeah, so it certainly can be, but I think whether it's Matip or whether it's Konate, I think they all have to be involved as well, because you can't essentially just follow someone around the pitch for the whole time, even though you'd like to, because that's going to be offering lots of opportunities for the others. But I think some of those matchups will be key. But for playing against Haaland, from what I've seen, it's not necessarily about physically dominating him at this point or that point. It's about, do you really know where he is when the ball's anywhere near around the box? Because he's very good at doing double movements to sort of sell you into thinking he's going to go one way and he goes the other. And if you do manage to keep a real close tabs on him, then great. But then if you overdo it, you're going to be missing out on people like Phil Foden, for example, who's in probably the best form of his life. So you can't just focus on one as a defender because you get punished by the others. And I suppose that's the skill of both sides. You can never just solely isolate one person and think, well, if you stop them, you stop the whole team because they're just so good and they've got so much talent everywhere. But it should make for a very good contest. And I suppose this is me putting my defender's hat on and not necessarily my Liverpool one on. You could be great for 89 minutes, but if you're bad for one, that could be the tie gone and you lose the battle. So that's the
Yeah.
only thing that sort of plays against Van Dijk as a defender is, only needs to make one mistake or not be in the right position one time, and before you know it, that's a costly moment.
Yeah, fantastic battle, and no doubt we'll speak next week when Liverpool win, hopefully. Arsenal started the season.
Okay.
Arsenal have started the season so well. Look, really good back-to-back performances against Tottenham and Liverpool. They go to Ellen Road to take on a Leeds side that have started to kind of falter a little bit. I think it's fair to say under Jesse Marsch, they lost. Well, they haven't won any of their last 5 matches, but it's an Ellen Road sort of atmosphere that you've played there. It can get very loud in there as well. Arsenal will go there with confidence. How do you see this one playing out?
This is going to be, I think, a good test for Arsenal because people would agree they are the better side, they're in the better form and all that stuff. But going to Ellen Road, sometimes they do enjoy taking the mantle of being the underdog, and they can go and be the underdog and try and have a high press and kind of like how they played against Chelsea a few weeks ago, and they ended up dominating that game the way that they did. So I think it'll be a good test again for Arsenal's sort of philosophy and mentality. Like, can you keep the fundamentals in play? Can you have the character to get on the ball, move the ball, make the right runs, make the right decisions when somebody's going to be in your face for 60, 70 minutes within the match?
Yeah.
And I'll be leaning towards Arsenal to win it. But the game itself, you just don't know. Ellen Road is a tough place to go when the crowd get right behind their team and their team are on the front foot as well. But Arsenal, 8 wins out of 9. Wouldn't surprise me if they made it 9 wins out of 10. But in the same breath, if things start to go against them, then this, for me, could be their biggest test so far, but in a different sort of way. Because the side they come up against isn't one that will essentially outplay them. But there's a chance that they might try and outwork them and make it as physical and difficult as possible. Because, as I say, Ellen Road is a very, very tough place to play football.
Nathan, one thing I've noticed that Arteta has done this season is kept really to the same 11. Against Arsenal, Tomiyasu came in, Zinchenko was injured, and he decided to go Tomiyasu instead of Tierney. Do you think he sticks with the same 11? Do you see any changes coming in for this trip to Ellen Road?
I think that's a good question. I think Arteta he's very good at sort of seeing the strengths of his team and seeing, say, the strengths of the opposition and making little tiny tweaks, not necessarily things which are really obvious and that involve significant personnel changes, but just having just little tweaks in terms of the strategy. So I don't see many changes because you look at the front three, they're playing so well. You see Xhaka and Odegaard playing so well, Partey playing so well. Defensively, they're pretty good as well. But I think they'll just maybe adjust something tactically in game. So I don't see many changes coming because at the end of the day, a side that's winning, like everyone wants to praise City, but they're second. Arsenal are top of the Premier League. They've won 8 games out of 9. They've won more games than Man City have this season. So they need to be respected. And for those players, the type of form that are in now, they might never feel again in their careers. So when they're like this and they're feeling hot, you've got to get them out there, keep them playing, and just keep them enjoying their football because they're in the type of position which most people could only dream of.
Yeah, so far so good for Arteta's side and Arsenal. And Arsenal fans, believe it or not, I've spoken to a few of them, are starting to believe in the top 4 place, not the league, by the way, just the top 4 spot. Big game at Old Trafford, 5th versus 6th, Man United versus Newcastle. Big test, this one for Eddie Howe. Big test, some will say, for Eric Ten Hag as well. Battle of the Brunos as well. We've got Bruno Fernandes versus Bruno Guimaraes. Out of that, by the way, the Battle of the Brunos, who do you think right now you would have in your team if you could only pick one? Fernandes or Guimaraes?
I think I'd go Guimaraes, but obviously that could change. But then when you look at the sort of their relative standings between the two sets of supporters, I think United fans remember how well Bruno Fernandes did a couple of seasons ago, but they're not necessarily getting that level of traction and love right now for him. I think he can obviously do well and still have an impact. Whereas at Newcastle, Guimaraes is the guy, they love him. They love the way he plays, love his impact, and they love the fact that he's at their football club. So I think he's got better standing at this moment. He probably arrives in the game with more confidence. And this is such an intriguing game because, as you've mentioned there, it's 5th versus 6th. It's Man United versus Newcastle. It's 5th versus 6th. And for both these teams, you're looking up the table, you're thinking, can we sneak into 4th? Can we find the form to do that? So this makes this a legitimately big game, even though some people might not fancy the two of them. They are where they are on merit. And going into it, I think it could be a shock for some people associated with United, Manchester United, that is. If Newcastle really go out and take the game to them, move the ball well, put them under pressure, because it's not something that we've seen for such a long time. Newcastle haven't been objectively great in the Premier League for such a long time.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting game. Going to be probably going to be a sellout for Newcastle for where they aspire to be. They need to be going to places like Old Trafford and not just putting on a performance but getting the results. So it'll be interesting to see how they take it on.
And this will be the gauge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this will definitely be one of the gauges in terms of where they're actually at and where they can aspire to be, because they made a good account for themselves against Man City. I think it was against Liverpool. But those two, you could argue, are probably a little bit ahead of where Man United are. So Newcastle arriving at Old Trafford, maybe this is one of your peers or people you think that you're ahead of at this moment. So go and show us.
Quick word on the main man, Cristiano Ronaldo. He's going to get a run of games now, isn't he? Anthony Martial. Looks like he's going to be out for a few weeks. He got his 700 career goal against Everton, which is ridiculous. I mean, you'd have to be a wonderful player to have played 700 games, let alone score 700 club goals. He will start, no doubt, against Newcastle. What do you make of the big man?
Well, you say no doubt, but you're never sure. You're never sure in this world. But I'll tell you one thing now, 700 goals. I think in my life, through playing five-a-side, through doing shooting practices, through playing FIFA, I don't think I've had 700 shots. But think, like, this man has had 700 goals. It's so impressive. And for the love that we have of the younger generation coming through, they're so iconic, whether it's Haaland, Mbappe, people like that. But it's still, 500 goals basically behind Cristiano Ronaldo. That's incredible, that level of consistency. And it's not consistency being good. It's like the consistency of being the best, being one of the greatest of all time. It is spectacular. And like, why is it going to stop anytime soon? Wouldn't surprise me if he scored on the weekend. Would surprise me if he scored a ton more between now and the end of the season.
Won't surprise me either. He's Cristiano Ronaldo. Put money on it if I'm telling you. All right, Nadim, as always, really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you as always for tuning in to the DAZN Soccer Show.